everybody, and happy Tuesday. It's another hour of good nature coming your way from the native plant garden at Pottawatomie. I can't believe we're starting on time. Everything went eerily smoothly as I was setting things up, so we'll see. I'm sure there's a glitch coming, so hold on. It'll be here before we know it. Might even start now. I wanted to start actually sort of where we left off last week. Or touching on one of the things that we talked about last week, and that goes to the Aston sisters, to Laura and to Jerry, and your astute field observations as they pertain to our damselflies. What we were looking at last week was some video footage that Laura and Jerry and Kate took when they were out at Fearson Creek at Leroy Oaks Forest Preserve. Leroy Oaks has a wonderful diversity of damselflies. We see the ebony jewelwing there. We see the American ruby spot there. We see lots of little of the blue damselflies, which I believe that's what you guys caught on video when you were there. But when we were talking about it last week, there was some discussion as to what exactly was going on. We thought there was some egg laying, there might have been some mating. A couple of you, Dorothy, thank you for sending that video. Jerry, you did some follow-up too. Appreciate the added info. I'm pretty sure what we were watching was some egg laying, and I'd like to now try to review that with some more footage. Now this is some footage that does not have any musical accompaniment. There's no head, thorax, and abdomen. This is just the delightful sound of babbling creek water there at Leroy Oaks. Let's take a look at this. And we'll hit play. So here we've got our damselflies flying in. In fact, some of these, the way they're holding their wings, a lot of these, there's a group of these insects that are called spread wings, and I'm wondering if that's actually what we're looking at there because of the way they're holding their wings. I can't say for sure. Some of them look blue as well, but we are definitely seeing egg laying going on. If we stop it here or here, we're seeing a lot of couplings. Still, we're seeing pairs of dragonflies flying around. What I've now learned since last week is that is the male and the female still together. He is clasping her head. I made reference to an article I'd written way back when I worked at Red Oak, and it was titled, "I Want to Hold Your Head." The male damselfly has a clasping organ on the bottom tip of his abdomen, and he clasps the female's head. And then, as we'll see in just a second, they form a mating wheel. The non-romantics call it a wheel. The romantics call it a heart. But that's how the actual mating occurs. But then he stays clasping onto her to fight off the other males. He wants to make sure it's his genetic material that gets passed on as she's laying those eggs. He doesn't want any outliers sneaking in there and changing things up on him. So yes, that's what we're seeing here is the egg laying part. Let's listen to it again. I just love that sound of the water trickling. They're flying in, they're landing. Females are dipping their abdomen in the water. Those eggs then are pretty much on their own. Mom and Dad are not going to stick around after that. Those will hatch into little nymphs, which will stay in the water for about a year, gradually getting larger and larger. They do not form any sort of a pupa. They go through what's called gradual metamorphosis. They get larger and larger and larger till they're big enough to come out of the water and shed their skin one more time. Their wings drop down, fill with fluid, and off they go. That'll happen next year for the eggs that are being laid right now. All right, I'm going to stop this share, and I'm going to pull up another picture that kind of shows that let's see. No. It shows the what the that wheel or that heart looks like, and it's actually from the cover of a PDF that you can look up for your very own. It's put out by the Field Museum. It's a guide to damselflies. So let's see, I want to share this, right? Yeah. All right, hopefully you're all seeing a PDF that says the Damselflies of Chicagoland, a photo field guide. In fact, if I did the share right, you'll also be able to see up at the top the URL where you can find this guide for your very own, fieldguides.fieldmuseum.org, and it's Damselflies, and it's showing. Okay, so this is a slightly, and we're all seeing that, right? We're seeing Damselflies of Chicago. We're seeing a sort of a lopsided heart or a very out of shape wheel, but the individual on the top who's bent around and is clasping the head of the individual down below. So that's the male on the top. And then the female, she's kind of making, well, it's sort of the shape of a musical note, only her wings are sticking out to the left. But she is receiving his sperm. But what's also going on there is he has a little device that he uses to clean out her orifice, her receptacle, her girl parts. And he's making sure that there isn't any trace of any previous males. So it's imperative then that once this occurs, that as far as this male is concerned, he's going to hang on and he's going to make sure that those eggs that he fertilized are the ones that get laid in the water. So that's in a nutshell what we were looking at last week. And this will be going on for probably a few more weeks. Like I said in the email, muggy weather is buggy weather, and it doesn't really matter what the bug is. They're all up to something these days. So let's see. With that, let's go to now. If I switch windows, do you all see July 19th, 2022 Good-Natured Hour?
Yep.
All right. Well, all right, let's pick up then. Since we are recapping things, let's just pick up where we left each other last week at 9 o'clock on Tuesday. That would have been on July the 12th. I ended the Zoom and I got up and I'd been seeing, little bits of silk flying in front of me. I knew the spiders were active. In fact, I had a spider that was spinning a web between me and the table while we were doing last week's program. So I guess it's not just buggy weather, it's also spidery weather, arachnidy weather. I saw a shadow over on the community center that I wanted to go and check out, and so I did. And this is what I found. This big girl here kind of makes me wonder if she spent the winter as an adult. Now, the commonly held thought on spiders is that they die after they lay their eggs in the fall. And I know some of them do. I've seen them die after they deflate, after they lay all their eggs. But the author and naturalist Bernd Heinrich, he's a naturalist out in the Northeast. He was a professor for many years. He has a cabin up in Maine where he conducts a lot of his naturalist study. He was actually doing a mark and recapture study with some of the spiders that lived on his shed up there in Maine, and he found that they were able to overwinter. And some of them he estimated at 4 and 5 years old. The reason I think this spider is maybe one that's more than a year old is because she's so big. I wasn't able to, I did try to put my lip balm up against her, but in order to do that, I kept touching her web, and she didn't like that at all. This is actually, she's actually spread out in her orb web against the brick face there on the community center. So I didn't want to ruin her beautiful artwork, so I took the lip balm away. But she was, I would say, at the where her legs are spread all the way out, she was a $50 or bigger in size. That body was just a little bit smaller than a dime. She is a big girl. And again, I'm saying the female spiders are the ones that create those beautiful orb webs, and they're the ones that get the big abdomens because they're the ones that lay the eggs. So I was excited to see this because this is not what I call the usual suspect as far as orb weavers go in this area. We'll get to that one in a minute. This spider is called a gray cross spider, and it's actually in a different genus than what we oftentimes see too. It's Lernioides. I think the species is Sclopitarius, and it's a spider that now with spiders, as with so many animals, pattern and color isn't always the thing you go by. There's usually a few other things you look at. With spiders, it's often the eye arrangement. She was having none of that. But looking at these bold markings here, and let's zoom in a little bit so we can see what she looks like. Very fancy marks here on her back. And then she was kind enough to climb up her web, which is actually going away from the building, and I was able to get a look at her underside. And look at this unique pattern we have here. Sclopitarius has this sort of, I don't know if you'd call these parentheses. I guess it depends on if you're grammatically inclined, or maybe you see something else there, but a dark marking surrounded by light markings, C shapes maybe. But that is one of the field marks that you look at when you're looking at this particular type of spider. So I was excited to see that because again, what we often see very soon, our downtown bridges and our downtown storefront windows, anywhere that there's lights, there's going to be these big orb webs, and they're going to be the home of this spider here. This is another spider with cross in its name. This is the Cross Orb Weaver. And you can see how it gets its name. It's that distinctive cross shape on its back. Let's zoom in here. Oops. See if we can go in a little bit farther here. Usually is white, the cross marking, but not always. In fact, sometimes the cross marking is absent, and in those cases, I don't know how you tell. You have to look at the eyes. But the Cross Orb Weaver is one of these species we refer to as being cosmopolitan. It's everywhere. It's up on the 95th floor of the John Hancock building, and it's on the masts of ships that are docked in the Mediterranean and over in Asia. It goes around the world. This is a very, very mobile and well-traveled spider because it goes everywhere. It has creates large numbers of eggs, and as people have moved around the world, they have managed to bring this spider with them. So look this summer and see how many of these spiders you see, and then even if you don't know what other spiders you're looking at, orb weaving spiders, see how many you can find that do not have that distinctive cross on the back. There's a good chance that they are not cross. Like I said, every once in a while there's a Cross Orb Weaver that doesn't have that bold marking, but for the most part, you're going to be able to see it. And my challenge to you is to see if you can find some that don't have it. So as we get back to last Tuesday night, that spider was directly across from me, working on her web here on the side of the community center. Well, I went for a little walk. I actually started thinking, it's July. I haven't had a chance to go out and look for stag beetles yet. You'll know I have this thing about stag beetles. So I was sort of thinking that maybe there would be some stag beetle habitat here at Pottawatomie with all the wood chips we spread. The very best site here in St. Charles that I knew about was at Lincoln Park, where years and years of wood chips on the playground there across from Old St. Pat's Church. As those wood chips break down, they create the ideal habitat for developing stag beetle larvae. They're in there for 2 years feeding on the cellulose and maybe some of the lignin that went into making those trees. As that wood is decomposing, the grubs are hurrying or aiding that process by feeding on that wood, and what they excrete, what they poop out, becomes part of the soil and the rich microfauna that lives in the bed of wood chips. So yeah, we have a lot of wood chips around here. I walked around the native plant garden with my flashlight, hoping to see beetles crawling up through the chips, and I didn't see them. So I headed around to the front of the building where we've got quite a bit more wood chip areas. And I looked around the old oak tree by the parking lot, and then I started walking along the building. Didn't see any stag beetles, but I did see this gal. So let's take a look here. Let's zoom in on what I think is, I'm going to take a crack at Neoscona. Anybody who speaks Latin, you're welcome to correct me on that, but she's not Larinoides, and she's not an Erroneous, I don't think, because she has a really cool pattern on her belly as well. So let's zoom in first. Let's look at her. You can see she doesn't have the bold patterns and any sort of coloring on her abdomen. If we zoom back out, the lights in the background, that's Gaffney Field. So she was actually spinning this web in the bushes on the front of the community center in such a way that I was able to get behind the web and take this picture. And then this one is what we see when we walk by from the front. So if we zoom in here, now see here, we don't have a C shape or parentheses. We have more of an L. This spider's also got a lot more hair on her back, on her body. So and that's where I'm going with this Neoscona. And look at this web. Isn't that cool? If we zoom back out again, she just really did a nice job, didn't she? You can tell it's fresh because there's really nothing that's been caught in it yet. So as we marvel at it from a human perspective and talk about how pretty it is, from a spider perspective, at that point anyway, it was a fail because there's nothing to eat. But it was early yet. It was at this point it was probably 9:30, so she had a long night ahead of her, and hopefully she was able to find something good. I'll check on both of these spiders when we wrap up tonight's program. So I still had stag beetles on the brain, and so from here at Pottawatomie, I did head over across the river to Lincoln Park. As I said, that has always been a hotbed of stag beetle activity, but the playground was replaced. And when they replaced the playground, they took away all those wonderful decomposing wood chips, and I would imagine a whole lot of stag beetle larvae. And I didn't hold out much hope of what I was going to find. But I thought, I'm going to give it a shot. So I parked and I walked into the park itself. Had my head down, and by this point it was getting close to 10 o'clock. It was pretty dark. I'm looking, I'm not really seeing anything. I'm grumbling in my head of why did we have to replace the wood chips? I get a little cranky sometimes. I was probably a little tired. But anyway, I get to the playground, and I hear a voice from up above my head going, "Oh, did you lose something?" I look up, and here's these three kids, three teenagers, are sitting up on one of the climbing structures. There's a thing made out of rope at on the new playground equipment, and they were up there. As it turns out, they were super nice kids. They jumped down and they offered to help me look. For even when I told them that I know I hadn't lost anything, I was really just looking for beetles. The one girl actually, she goes, "Oh, I just saw one. I had to move it. I was afraid of it, but then I realized that we might hurt it by climbing here, so we moved it." And she took me over into the grass where they had placed this guy. So I picked him up and I put him on the picnic table here. It's a stag beetle. It's a male Lucanus capreolus, the reddish brown stag beetle. I was thrilled. So some of that population persists there. Maybe from the wood chips there, they've been able to spread out into the soils. There are still some wood chips around the gazebo band shelter thing that's in the middle of the park. Other people have since told me that they have seen stag beetles crawling around in the grass there. So maybe the population survives, and we just need to let the new bed of wood chips start to break down and ferment and create that ideal stag beetle habitat again. So yay, we found one. We found one live one. We actually found one dead one too, which I took a couple pictures of and just kind of buried him in some wood chips. From there, I thought, let's see if we can find some. So I'm thinking between Lincoln Park and my house, where else are there wood chips? So I went from there, local folks, maybe you can picture this, I went to Bakerfield Park, which is between 5th and 6th Streets, and maybe Cutler for the east-west, or Mosedale, one of those streets, maybe both of those streets. That's another part, incidentally, that is up for renovation. So the wood chips in that playground are going to be going away too. That playground is largely in the sun, and I don't think that's quite the habitat that these beetles like. I think the wood chips might get too warm there. They might get too dry. I didn't have any luck. So from there, I headed to the playground equipment at Davis School, which the park district maintains for the school district, and I headed for the north. There's two sets of playground equipment there. I went to the ones on the north side of the school because that one is more shaded. And now at this point now, it's probably, I don't know, 10:30, quarter to 11. I'm sure anybody walking by would have thought I was some kind of creeper there in the kids' playground late at night, crawling on my hands and knees underneath the climby thingy they have there, because I saw wood chips moving, and yes, glory be, there were stag beetles. There was this guy here, and there was this gal here. Now let's look, if we compare the two. Now this picture shows really nicely how this reddish brown stag beetle gets its name. Look at the up at the top of his legs, the femur on that's a pair of legs that's showing there on the left side. It's reddish brown. There's a distinct difference. It's a lighter color from the rest of the body, and that's one of the field marks for this particular species. Yeah, as I was saying, there was a male and there was a female. In fact, there were two males and two females. I made a video of what the males and the females eventually got around to. So I watched these beetles for probably, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes. It was getting kind of late. Actually, it got really late, but I'll get to that in a minute. So I watched the video. I was going to show it to you guys, and I thought, it's a little graphic, but there's a lot of wrestling that goes on between these beetles, and then the male eventually dominates and gets on top of the female, and hopefully there's some eggs, some fertilized eggs that are now being formed. I actually have borrowed these beetles from the Davis playground there in a little critter keeper plastic aquarium on my kitchen counter. I went back the next day. I realized my Stag Beetle quest, I wasn't very well outfitted for it. I had to go pawing through the trash to find some containers to bring these beetles home. I ended up with 2 little bags of Scooby snacks that I put the beetles and some substrate in it, and then I went back the next day with a trowel and I got some of that broken down, that lovely mycelium-filled, fungal strand-filled decomposing wood chip layer that's just below the surface of these not so decomposed wood chips. So I'm going to check this weekend to see if we've got some egg deposition, and if we do, then the beetles are going to go back to the playground, and then I'm going to go on to the next phase, which, in learning about that, kept me up till 3:30 last Tuesday, July 12th. Turns out there's a whole culture of people, go figure, on the internet that raise different types of beetles. And I got really involved in some of the beetle forum descriptions of creating the ideal environment for nurturing beetle larvae. It involves fermenting wood flakes, which you buy in the form of pellets that are food grade pellets that are used for smoking meats. I'm not going to get into all that tonight. I first need to make sure I've got some eggs, and if I do, we'll talk about that another time. But anyway, last Wednesday was kind of a sleepy day for me because I was up almost all night learning about our beetle friends. Anyway, if you see these around, rejoice that you have them close by. They are wonderful parts of our local ecosystems. There's really not too many creatures that can digest the cellulose and the lignin the way the grubs of these beetles can. And they do it by way of some very beneficial bacteria in their digestive systems. So very cool things. Keep your eyes out for them. All right, so the next day, I get this email forwarded to me from my coworker, Emily, and I'm going to read you. This is from a friend of Emily's in Texas, and it says, here is the egg that my friend found in Austin, Texas. There was only one, and it was found on the ground, and it was warm. The shell is hard, and as you can see, it's highly textured with blue streaks. It's a couple inches long. This has really thrown me for a loop. I originally thought it was a snake, but it has a hard shell, and some sort of pupae also doesn't seem likely since it's so hard. And I can't find anything online or in my field guides about something like this. Typically, I'm good at digging this stuff up and getting an ID, but I am stumped. Any help you could offer would be awesome. So let's look at this. And I would appreciate if anybody wants to chime in on the chats with what you think this might be. My analysis is that it is not of natural, as in a wildlife origin. It looks to me like it's plastic. There was another picture that this individual sent where there was a seam from a mold. I'm not sure what it is, though. To me, it reminded, that blue color reminded me of either some sort of fertilizer or some sort of detergent. I didn't know if this is something that was, oh, and it rattled. The person also said that it rattled inside. There was something inside of it. But I don't know if you've ever seen anything like this. Did it have something wrapped around it? I was thinking, does a plumb line, when those chalk lines that you use to when you're trying to see if something is plumb or not, do they come? No, they're usually in some kind of a retractable carrier. I was trying to think of things that were blue like this that might be wound up, but I'm pretty sure it is not a natural object, but it's a great example of how things can fool us. I remember one time I found, I thought it was a part of a bird's breastbone. Because bird bones are hollow, they feel different from mammal bones. And I looked at it and I was trying to figure out just where it was that it fit on the bird and what kind of bird it might have been. And it was only a partial piece of it. I realized it was a piece of plastic. So yeah, plastic really and truly is everywhere. Again, if anybody has any ideas on this, we'll check the chats later and see what your thoughts are. All right. So got a little bit more sleep the rest of the week, which was good. And went back out to Fearson Creek at Primrose Farm. I threw this picture in just because it is a great example of what happens when our streams get channelized and or straightened out. That was a common practice back when a lot of our local semi-damp areas, low-lying areas, marshy areas were tiled or drained, and the water was sent into a nearby creek. The goal back then was to get the water to move away quickly, and most streams have a natural meander to them. They wigwag back and forth. Well, to speed things up, you take those meanders out. Picture downhill skiing. You know, a slalom, you go back and forth and back and forth, and you control your speeds. Downhill racers, it's vroom, and you go faster and faster. It's the same with water. Well, over time, when you're dealing with a creek that's even partially channelized, the banks get severely eroded, and any trace of what was at one time a natural stream bed is covered in silt. If we zoom in again here, look at the mud here. Even little shorebirds were leaving pretty deep imprints in this soft mud. You can see there were raccoons and opossums. There was some big old bird tracks here that I think I took. Here, a heron went patrolling along in the shallows. I was actually checking this out for our upcoming Rusty Rodeo program on the first Saturday in August. Does anybody see any crayfish habitat there? I sure didn't. We're coming up with a plan for what we're going to do for Rusty Rodeo 2022. Well, we're not going to be looking for crayfish here. I did see a lot of toads, little toadlets hopping along. I did see some leopard frogs. That tells us that it's not a complete loss. There is some life there. Up around the bend, I could see some aquatic plants, emergent plants coming out. But the bank was so eroded. The bank was, when I stood on in this mud, that bank was up to my shoulders, which is about 5 feet. So there wasn't, except for this little muddy shoal here, there wasn't really a safe way to access or to walk along the creek any farther than this little part right here. So just a little lesson in what not to do to a creek. Luckily, Fearson gets healthier as we follow it down into Leroy, where we saw the damselflies, thanks to Jerry and Laura and Kate. All right, so I went to Johnson's Mound. Kim, it is looking awesome. Kim is the steward at Johnson's Mound, the volunteer steward that leads a wonderful group of dedicated people working on improving the habitat there. Well, the first thing I saw when I got there was this, an oak apple gall. And I thought, I've seen these for years. These are the things that grow on the leaves of oak trees. They don't really seem to have a preference for red or white. I believe I've seen them on both. But I've always heard they were formed by a wasp, and I thought this is the chance to research it and then let you guys know how this all works. So the oak apple gall wasp, adults hatch out in June or July, so about this time of year, and they mate. Oftentimes that's what happens in the adult stage of insects. There's probably more insects that mate and die than there are that mate and hang out for a while. It's always the case where the larva or the immature stage lasts longer than the adult phase. So anyway, they mate, and after they mate, the females burrow down into the soil, and they lay eggs on the roots of a tree. Okay, so then those larvae are down there, and they're feeding on those roots. Now, the reference I was reading, it just said for over a year. So I don't know if this is like cicadas, where nobody really knows how long the annual cicadas are down there. We just know it's more than 1 year. I might need to do some more digging on that. But they're down there, they're feeding on the roots. They get to, they're almost adult size, and they pupate. So then they undergo all the major changes of going, it's a complete metamorphosis, unlike the gradual that we talked about with the damselflies. So parts get rearranged, they grow wings, and they oftentimes will change the sort of mouth parts that they have. They then emerge, and the wingless females will crawl up out of the soil and up on a trunk until they find a newly formed leaf. So then she lays an egg on that leaf, and that causes the leaf to react and form this thing we see here. It's about the size of a ping pong ball, maybe. They vary in size too. Some are smaller, some are bigger, but they seem like they're hollow. But if you open them up, you see there's all kinds of little strands where that larvae was in there and where it was developing and feeding. So each one of these only has one little larva in it. It pupates in this chamber and emerges. They fly out, find a mate, and the whole cycle starts all over again. So the way I'm reading this is that there's two different types of adults. There's the adults that come out. Let's see. Adult wasps hatch in June or July. They go into the soil. They lay eggs. They die down there, right? And then the larvae feed on the roots. They come up, and they come out, and they lay eggs, and then they die. And then there's larvae that develop in the oak apple gall. So that it sounds like there's a dual life cycle that's going on there. I thought that was pretty cool. Got more research to do, but if you're seeing these things on the ground, now you know why. It's the oak apple gall.
So Pam, where exactly, since I was out there today, where exactly did you see them?
These were by the red oak tree that's right by the front parking lot on Hughes Road.
Okay, because we have a work day on Thursday, so maybe we'll look for them.
See how many more you can find. There were several in the. This is just in the mowed grass there. There's the kiosk, there's some sort of signage there, and then there's the parking side, and then there's where you enter the road to go up, drive up.
Okay.
So yeah, Johnson's Mound, fabulous place, and Kim, you could probably say a lot more about the history than I can, but it's.
I could.
Yeah.
But we do have a work day on Thursday from 9 to maybe 12, maybe 11, depending on the weather. So, but we were out there looking for fungus today. So.
Oh well, I would imagine muggy weather is.
Yeah,
is
we found 6 more, so that's good. All good.
Well, it's a very prominent landmark in Kane County. It's one of the oldest forest preserves in the Kane County Forest Preserve Network. I believe wasn't the first white.
It was.
Kane County born there?
It was the first one after the act went into effect in 1928. I think it was the first, the Forest Preserve Act in the state of Illinois. It was the first one claimed after that. So it's been almost 100 years now. So Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's got the wonderful old pavilion up at the top that was made in the style that the bats still like. Now there's a newer
Right.
pavilion down by the parking lot, but
Yes.
the bats, and I love how you know, just see the bat guano on the ground, and instead of trying to get rid of the bats, they just push the picnic tables.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love it. So that
Yeah.
was made. Was it the CCC, Kim, or the
Yeah.
WPA?
I think it was the CCC, and they actually built the pavilion at the top from, I think it was maybe a Baptist church that burned down in the area, and they used the stones to build the pavilion at the top. So it's pretty old too. So
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think wasn't there like a dance pavilion or something new because there's some stairs that kind of lead
yes, I
to.
think there was Rob Cleve, who's the volunteer coordinator, knows all of that history because he lived there for a while. But yeah, there are steps up from that pavilion, and we think that they had like maybe a wooden dance floor because it's gone. So
Okay.
yeah,
Well, and the mound itself is made up of glacial material. It would be
right,
classified as a came, right?
right,
And didn't they
yes.
try to take some material away on the one side? There's a
Yes, on the west side, Greg, my co-steward, and I have found it's more of a, a cliff for their area. It's kind of like a cliff because it was right before they preserved it. They started using equipment to take the gravel out of there, which cames, of course, have underneath it. So, but then they preserved it, so it was a good thing. So there is an area, but it's on the well, it's not the far west side of the preserve anymore because there's now more of the preserve, but it's near Forest Preserve Drive where there are 5 homes. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, there is another mound, probably another came that was not so lucky, not too far from there, called Bald Mound, and it's now a material supply company. They dug out, they sold all the gravel, all the sand, all the boulders, all the rocks, and now I think they are still selling things there. They've added wood chips and things to it, but yeah, it's flat where Bald Mound is, but Johnson's Mound is a very prominent landmark.
Third highest spot in King County, which isn't saying much, but
But it's still.
it's still yeah,
I suppose if you go up fast enough, your ears pop, right?
right, exactly.
That wouldn't be me. Well, um, going around the Johnson's Mound too, thanks to the work of Kim and all the volunteers there, the woodland wildflowers there in April and May are just absolutely stunning. But now we're into July. Most of those flowers are receding, but there's still a lot to see. There's yellow jewelweed. This is Impatiens pallida. We've got orange jewelweed in this area too, but yellow is the less commonly seen variety, and it's growing right alongside the road that you can walk up or drive up. It's a nice paved road. Well, actually, nice and paved don't really go together in a forest preserve, but it's very accessible that way. And here's what the jewelweed is looking like. It's just starting to come into bloom, and it is growing in amongst a whole crop of stinging nettles. Now these are plants, if you've ever accidentally brushed up against them or backed into them in your shorts or your bare arms, you'll know it. Stinging nettles have little hairs all over them, and those hairs break very easily, and they basically inject you. They're kind of like a venom. They inject you with histamines and different acids, and it causes quite a stinging reaction. But nature always provides, having the jewelweed next to the stinging nettles. They both like that having their feet wet, having a moist environment in which to grow. You can break off the fleshy stems of the jewelweed. Impatiens, even if you're not familiar with the wild impatiens, the jewelweed, you might know the impatiens that you plant in your flower boxes and your flower beds at your house. The cultivated variety has a very fleshy stem too. There's a lot of liquid, a lot of fluid in it. You can use that fleshy stem of the wild impatiens, of the jewelweed, to rub it and get those hairs off and stop the stinging sensation. Now, I've also heard that jewelweed is supposed to help with poison ivy. I think then you'd have to rub really hard because you're trying to get the oil off your hands, and a lot of times you end up having to resort to things like soap and water and a washcloth in order to achieve that. But yeah, jewelweed, stinging nettles side by side. at Johnson's Mound and a lot of other places too. Now, I called this tall bellflower, but is it now American bellflower? It looks like there's been some name changes that have occurred. This is a flower where there's little streaks of sunlight. This flower is popping up. It's just an absolutely gorgeous purplish blue color. And I love the way the blossoms look. You can look at it as it's sticking its tongue out at you, or you can look at it like it's got a party blower, and it's blowing. It's celebrating that it's summertime. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. It's a gorgeous flower. It's a tall flower too. It's I would say over 4 feet tall. Very prominent there along the drive. Walked into the woods, got off of there are a number of footpaths too that go off into the mound itself. And what to my wondering eyes should appear but our old friends, the 6-spotted tiger beetles. And I saw this and I thought, wow, that is one big tiger beetle. And then I looked a little closer, and it's not just one, it's two. This is a beetle that they're very prominent in late spring and early summer. They're flying on pathways. At that point, they're feeding. This is a predatory beetle. They're very fast. It's hard to get a picture of them because they've got excellent eyes. They're ambush predators, and it's hard to sneak up on them. But these two they were busy, so they didn't mind that I snuck up on them and caught this photo. And then I think the next one is actually in a little bit better focus. So what's going to happen next is the female is going to lay some eggs, and the larvae are going to create burrows. And they're predators in their larval stage too. They will hang out at the mouth of the burrow that they create, and they will reach out and they will grab all manner of things that happen to crawl by. So they'll spend several months in that stage. They'll overwinter, they'll pupate, and then they'll come out in the springtime as hungry adults. So they feed in the early summer, and then they mate here in the middle of the summer. They lay the eggs, and then the larvae start to feed in the fall. They might even, kind of wondering if they might overwinter as larvae. I'd have to double check a life cycle calendar to see if they're larvae or pupa over the winter, but really neat, absolutely gorgeous. I mean, the color on these things, they rival that of those beautiful damselflies and dragonflies that we have. They really do look like jewels flying around, that iridescent green color. Well, so if you go to Johnson's Mound, and Kim, correct me if this is wrong, but I've always heard that trees fall down at Johnson's Mound because there's so many rocks, the roots can't go down very deep. Is that?
Well, I think you're the one who actually told me that, but
so, I make stuff up though.
Well, but you know what? We do think that makes sense because people do say there seem to be a lot of downed trees there, but indeed it is a cane, so. I think that, the soil isn't as compacted with all the gravel there, so it makes no sense that the trees wouldn't have a whole lot to grasp. So there are a lot of down nurse log trees, as we call them.
Nurse logs is a great way to put that. Yeah. Lots of fun. In fact, there was a family that was there when I was there, and there were some kids that were starting to make a little fort over some of those downed logs. They were dragging some of the branches around and making a fort, as they just kind of lend themselves to that. Well, I saw these two big logs crossed over each other, and I saw something inside, and I got a little closer, and it was what I'd been hoping to find the whole time I was there, the good old American millipede. Now, if we look at this picture, if you look down the lower left, you see a more typically sized millipede. I don't know the species of those. I want to say that they're a non-native greenhouse millipede. There's been a lot of millipedes. Usually, like if you're gardening at your house and you have some flower pots with saucers underneath, and there's a moist microclimate there, you'll probably find some millipedes and some earwigs. And yes, we're going to talk about those at some point, Jerry, but I didn't get to them this week. Earwigs are a whole other topic I want to address at some point this summer. But those are creatures that like this moist environment that we get around like flower pots. And like we were talking about with the Cross Orb Weavers, when people move around the world, they move things with them. They move spiders and they move millipedes. But this one in the middle here, this big old millipede that I would say is, it was 5 inches long. It was big. This is the American millipede. Let's see if we can zoom in here. I was excited to see that there wasn't just one, but there was a little bambino in there too. I don't know. They live multiple years, so I don't know, but I don't know what their lifespan is, and I don't know, like the one on the left there, how young is it? I don't know. Is it a year old? Maybe. I know as they grow, they add segments. And each segment, the difference between a millipede, well, there's a lot of differences between millipedes and centipedes, but millipedes, each body segment has 2 pairs of legs, and millipedes are detritivores. They eat and break down dead and dying things. So they're quite at home here in this moist and breaking down log. Maybe they're feeding on some fungi that's in there. I don't know. But they don't have any venom. Now centipedes have a multi-segmented body too, but each segment only has 1 pair of legs, and centipedes are predators. The very first pair of legs on their body has been modified into fangs that they use to inject venom. So I was hoping we would see these. I didn't run into any of the cyanide millipedes. That's the other thing that Johnson's Mound is known for. They have the brightly colored yellow legs, and they're both. Most millipedes have some sort of defensive chemical that they put out that helps protect them. Even though they've got all those legs, they can't always outrun their predators. So they have chemical defenses that they use. The cyanide millipedes, if you rattle them a little bit and then you sniff them, they smell like amaretto. So I was 1 for 2 in the millipede quest at Johnson's Mound. And then ran into another old friend there. This was Jack-in-the-Pulpit. But we're beyond. Jacks, they generally bloom in May. And there's the spathe and spadix structure, the jack, and then the pulpit. The jack, if it's a Jill, if it's a female plant and it gets pollinated, that plant turns into this really cool fruit right here. I haven't ever seen it in the green stage before, so this was kind of exciting. They always catch my eye as we get later in summer and into fall. Those little berries, each of which has a seed in it, they turn bright red, so they look like this enormous raspberry on the woodland floor. But that was kind of a happy surprise. I'd sort of forgotten to look for things like this. So Johnson's Mound, well known for its spring ephemerals, but some of them are still lingering on, and they're producing the seeds that will give us more flowers next year. So I'm gonna, this is the last of the slides. Bonnie, I know you had sent a picture in too. A lot of people are seeing bugs with variations on this theme. Kind of an oblong shape, some prominent antennae, and they don't fly. A couple of other people have sent me pictures like this, and they say, yeah, they're crawling around, but they're not flying anywhere. They don't seem inclined to fly. They're not inclined to fly because they can't fly yet. These are nymphs. I'm pretty sure this is a green stinkbug nymph. This was sent to me by a woman out in Winnebago County, and it's this is the stage. So this is another example of insects, and we've got green stink bugs. We've got a lot of native brown colored stink bugs, and we have that non-native, the brown marmorated stink bug. A lot of these they're all classified as shield bugs, and a lot of different species are in this stage right now. So ignore the colors because colors will vary with the species, but if you're seeing bugs like this with this general shape and kind of little bat wings they're forming, eventually those are going to get longer, they're going to cover the body, and this insect is going to be able to fly, but it has to molt a time or two more before it's ready to do that. But it is time for shield bugs to be growing up too. All right, with that, I'm going to stop the share. And we'll see, we got a couple of chats to get to. They took the trees down at Lincoln School. Can the wood be used as mulch? Or with the moth issue? No. Oh, that's too bad. So I sort of thought maybe that one tree that would be on the south side of Lincoln, at Lincoln and 7th, I sort of thought maybe it might resprout, but I don't know, maybe it's a safety issue. I didn't look that closely at it. We were talking about the spongy moth trees at the Natural Resources Commission last week, and a gentleman there, Lee, who had lived through the gypsy spongy moth invasion of the 1970s out on the East Coast, said that a lot of trees lost all their leaves, but they would resprout leaves. Leaves wouldn't get very big, but if the tree was able then to leaf out again the next spring, it was able to take in photosynthesize enough to survive. And he said what happened out there, even though so many trees were covered with gypsy moth caterpillars, he said a lot of the trees survived because the population of the moths or the caterpillars was so dense that once a disease hit them, it just wiped them all out. And he doesn't know what the disease was. Again, that was back in the 1970s. So that's interesting. So they're cutting those trees down. Can the wood be used as a mulch, or with not because of the moth issue? I'm not sure. They might have to be quarantined. I know there's been quarantines in place in the past. So I'm not sure about that, Meredith, but I'm kind of thinking maybe not. If that would maybe, unless the mulching process would destroy the egg case, but it seems like there would be a chance that some could survive. So I'm going to guess not. Also wondering, is it just me? I'm not seeing many butterflies this year. Everything's kind of late. I've just started to see more monarchs, I would say, in the last week. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that, but I have seen more in the last week than I've seen all summer. And I think the cool, wet spring that we had, there was other parts of the country that was experiencing similar sorts of cool weather, and cooler temperatures do slow things down. Not as many fireflies, Laura. Yeah, it's funny you said that. There was one that came over. Oh, hold on. I'm always kind of torn when I see a firefly in a spider web, because I want the spider to be able to eat, but I want the firefly to be able to live too. So I just seen this one fly in a minute ago. Did it fly off? Maybe it's okay. Oh no, here it is. So yeah, we'll get this little guy cleaned off here. Um, it can be on its way. Oh, now it's on my screen. Hopefully I remember, or hopefully it flies away before I put the screen back down again. But yeah, I think I saw a whole bunch of fireflies when I was at Primrose Farm, when I got into the reed canary grass last week. So I kind of wonder if they're delayed too because of the cool weather. The first ones I saw were later than I remember. Some days, or some years, I've seen them like in the middle of May, but two of the times when that happened, we were heading into a hideously hot and dry summer. So it might be good that they're coming out later like this. We'll see if they continue to show or if this is all we're going to get. But that cool wet spring may be delaying some of what we're seeing. Let's hope. Anybody else have anything they'd care to share with the group?
Pam, this is Diane.
Oh, hey, Diane.
I belong to several Facebook monarch groups all over the country, and almost every state, the persons that are interested in monarchs are complaining about the lack of eggs, and yeah, particularly in Ohio. I've seen comments from Michigan, and even some of my friends in Canada are complaining about so I'm just hoping they're late, but there does seem to be a reduction in the number of monarch eggs and caterpillars being sighted or being reared.
Diane, was there any talk in those groups about what happened last winter? Was there any big event down in Mexico that might have wiped out a bunch?
No, actually, Mexico had higher numbers, which is what's curious.
Okay.
But perhaps on the way back, there were some issues in Texas, and I don't know. As I say, I'm hoping they're just late. But they're just I seem to be hearing it from a number of different states. So
okay, well, yeah, let's
yeah, it's kind of disturbing because if the numbers were good in Mexico, we were all hoping that the numbers would be better here, but I don't know. But maybe they're just late, as you say, the late spring and
late. And I know, we had some wacky weather, and they're very prone to, but storms. In the case of fireflies, if we have a cold, wet spring, well, it just means that the larvae that are in the ground are going to take longer to develop. But in the case of monarchs, because we've got a animal that's migrating in legs, if there was a severe storm that wiped out a whole chunk of them as they're trying to make their way back, that would affect then the numbers that we end up with.
Although it's interesting, the last week I saw several comments that people had been, they called it egg bombed, where all of a sudden they looked and they had all kinds of eggs, numerous eggs on one particular milkweed plant, so which is unusual.
Okay.
So anyway, maybe there's hope.
Maybe there is. Yeah, let's hope so. I know I have a friend up in Elgin who has been raising some, and her big problem is the source that she goes to is a vacant lot that happens to have a lot of milkweed, but it gets mowed. So
sure.
She tries to collect as many as she can and get them out of there before the mowers come through. And then the milkweed does come back, and it actually causes, because the females really search for tender young leaves.
Yes.
So the mowing, it might destroy some, but it also then creates a lot more soft leaves that the females seem to select for. So we'll keep an eye on that.
Send her my contact information. I have plenty of milkweed.
Okay. All right. Sounds good, Diane. Great to hear from you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? If not, I think the last cicada has had his hurrah. So do the same. Say goodnight, folks. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. I am going to do my best to leave here at a reasonable hour. I'm not going to creep around any playgrounds tonight, but I'll be back next week, and we can talk more then. All right? Have a great evening, everybody. Good rest of your week.
Pam.
Take
Thank
care.
you, Pam.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks,
Pam.
Pam.
Thanks, Pam.
Have a good one.